John Fredericks Radio Network, great to have you. We are back. We're live at AFP Action in Richmond and having a great day here. Buddy Fowler still can't figure these headphones
just
out.
Keep them on, buddy.
Just keep them on, buddy. Don't take them off because you'll blow everybody's eardrums out.
You did it again, buddy.
Don't take the headphones off, buddy. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I just use these at the gun range.
John Fredericks Radio Network, I'm your Godzilla of truth, your oracle of the deplorables. Trump's going to win. I'm convinced of that. But we're here at AFP Action in Richmond with CEO and President of Americans for Prosperity, Tim Phillips, also Senior Advisor to Americans for Prosperity Action, Amanda Batten, with us. She's hung in there the whole time. Good job, Amanda.
I'm all the way up here. I might as well just stay.
Did a good job, Amanda Batten, House of Delegates member. Thanks for that ringing endorsement of
And I love the John Fredericks show.
Oh, thank you. Much better.
She recovered quickly, at least.
Yes, very good.
Yeah, nice
Kara, put that one on tape. Be sure we turned it into a promo. House of Delegates member, Peninsula, good friend of Tommy Norman. Also with us is, I'm sorry, come on, I love Tommy. Also with us is Sheriff Chapman. Tommy and I have a great relationship. He comes on. I call him right now, and he'd come on. He comes on whenever I want. So we have a great relationship. Although he was mad because I backed Amanda when she wouldn't pay him his dues, and then they got mad at me. But now we all made up. Sheriff Chapman's with me from Loudoun County. Buddy Fowler can't figure his headphones out. House of Delegates member, Republican, Hanover. And Andrew Naggs, who's got something up his sleeve that Reeves is cooking up, but he won't tell us. And Senator Bryce Reeves from Stafford County with us via phone. Senator, thanks for hanging.
Easy.
Okay, let's get to. And did you hear that ringing endorsement I just got from Amanda Batten? I mean, was that something else or what? It's amazing.
You should feel honored. I had to get up early to get up here this morning. And it's a Monday morning.
You stayed for 4 hours. I mean, I'm impressed. I have to say that. I have to impress. All right, so we were talking about law enforcement, and Sheriff Chapman, I want to get you involved here. First of all, what happened in Loudoun County? Why were they trying to oust you?
Well, I'll tell you what, it brings up a great point, and I think when Senator Reeves, when you're talking about public safety, everything in the Commonwealth of Virginia revolves around public safety, and if you don't feel safe, nothing else matters. And I can tell you what's going on in Loudoun County. We have the largest sheriff's office in the Commonwealth of Virginia, so I've got about 600 plus sworn, and I've got a couple hundred civilians, so we got about 800 total. And it's a large department, and as an elected official, I represent everybody, all 413,000 residents of that county. And even though I'm a Republican and I run as a Republican, I'm conservative. The fact of the matter is that when you're elected sheriff, the job is apolitical, and you treat everybody fairly and equally under the eyes of the law. And so what you have here is a board of supervisors that several of them that wanted to take over, make it a police department, and they're saying that because I'm elected, that's more political than a police chief would be, which is exactly the opposite. And right now you've got a 6-3 board in Loudoun County of Democrats over Republicans, and they see an opportunity here to try to take over, make it a police department, so that they can control the agenda of a police chief. And you don't have to look very far across the nation to see what's going on here. Look at Seattle, look at Portland, look at Atlanta, look at Washington, D.C., look at Baltimore. Look at all these places here where you have police chiefs that are running law enforcement, and they're running it at the will and the whim of elected officials. And when you do that, it becomes all political. And you have chiefs that can't do their job. They have all this training. You have folks that have a lot of education and background and experience, and they can't do anything they want to do because they've got a political entity, a mayor, a county executive, whatever, that's telling them what to do. And what that does is it makes it entirely political, and it's actually really jeopardizing public safety. You look at Seattle; they're going to disband their department up there, and look at all this stuff about defund police. I mean, just last night, they had 20 people that were shot in Washington, D.C. A couple weeks ago, you had 49 law enforcement officers from the Chicago PD that were trying to protect the Columbus statue out there, and 18 of them had to go to the hospital. One of the police officers there had his eye injured from fireworks that were shot out. They were throwing bottles of ice, frozen bottles of water at the police officers that were trying to protect this statue. And this is the kind of thing that's going on nationally here because you have politicians running police departments. And what what happened in Loudoun is that I think they thought with this election coming up, and Loudoun tends to vote Democratic certainly in presidential elections, and they get a big turnout, that they were going to put this on the sample ballot, make this a police department. They tried to slip it in at the last minute. We caught it. We immediately went public on this, and we hit every, and we had already been prepared for this because the day after the election, the chairwoman Phyllis Randall said, "Hey, we want to make this a police department." The day after the election, because she wants to control law enforcement. She wants to control me. She doesn't want me to have my own voice. She doesn't want the people to have their own voice. She wants to control that. So she immediately mentioned that. So we did our homework, and we put together a very comprehensive study. It turned out to be a 99-page study. And we had this ready and waiting in case they tried to do this, and sure as heck they tried to do it on the very last day, that they could try to get it on the board as an item, thinking nobody would notice. It would go on as a referendum. People would vote to make this a police department, and then I'd end up being a police chief, or I probably wouldn't. I'd stay sheriff, and they would bring in their police chief to do whatever they want their chief to do. So we were able to defeat that. How
did you defeat it?
Well, I'll tell you what, we went out, first of all, we went with a press release that Saturday morning. This was Friday a couple weeks ago. So Friday morning, we find out it's added to the agenda for the Board of Supervisors without any documentation, without any study, without anything. I mean, she had the votes, and she knew it. The chairwoman had the votes, and she knew it on the board. So we went ahead and we did a press release that talked about this being a power grab. We talked about all the elements that were involved, the cost that this would incur, and everything else, and we hit that with a press release on Saturday morning and hit it on Facebook, went to Nextdoor. We got about 80,000 followers on Nextdoor. We got about 80,000 followers on our Twitter, and probably 50 or 60 on our Facebook. So we hit every avenue that we could to get this word out. By within an hour, we had 500 shares on Facebook on that, and by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we had 1,500 shares. By Monday, we had 242,000 views on our press release. So we actually went to the public, and the public came in. The Board of Supervisors got so many calls on this. They were inundated. They were completely inundated with calls that I think the speakers that signed up for the following Tuesday to speak on this, or it was actually a weekend and the following Tuesday, filled up within the first hour. And then he had another 50 or 60 that were waiting to get on so that they could also get before the board.
What would have given Sheriff Chapman, the supervisors in Loudoun County, the ability to basically overturn an elected position? What authority was vested in them to do that? Because you were elected by the people, right?
That's right. What you do is you put it on referendum, and what they can do is they can separate the law enforcement duties of a sheriff's office and make that police duties, and then we would still keep the jail and the court duties. So they were just trying to separate the duties, and they can actually do that by referendum if they get the county vote on it. Wow.
Senator Reeves, you want to weigh in here?
I do, absolutely. Thank you, Sheriff, for defeating that. You know, the Sheriff and I go way back from our days in DEA and some other things, and I will tell you, as a member of Prince William County Police, when they first formed that police department, we didn't have the same scenario going on in the country, and they were overwhelmed with the jail and those sort of things, so they needed the police department to help with the actual day-to-day street activity and those sort of things. And so I'm glad the sheriff did this. You know, the Democrats are talking about letting law enforcement, at least police departments, organize under unions. And look, I got nothing wrong with some of the unions that are out there, but if you look at the states where the police have been unionized, and the left is always complaining about rogue cops and bad cops, let them get unionized and see how hard it is to get rid of a bad police officer, and you'll find out why we don't want our police departments unionized. Now, a quick distinction, and I think the sheriff touched on it, but I want to make sure everybody that's listening understands. A sheriff is a constitutional officer elected by the people. If we don't like him, we can get rid of him in 4 years. A police chief, however, has to respond to either the county board of executive, the executive of that county, or, as the sheriff mentioned, the board of supervisors, and they can be hired and fired at will. So if they don't like the way a department's being run, they'll just fire them. And that's not good for officer morale. That's not good for the officers on the department. Oftentimes there's not real grievance process. And so that's what he's talking about, pulling strings on on these types of things. And I'm so glad they defeated that in Loudoun County. The sheriff there does a great job when you look at where his officers are, how they're trained. They're one of the best departments in the country, not just the state, in the country. And when you look at that, John, down where you are, you have Sheriff Stolley there. And when you talk to Sheriff Stolley, who was once a state senator and he's a lawyer as well, he's done some great things in his jail that he houses. He has one of the largest populations in jail based on his jurisdiction. And some of the justice reform he's done in there to make sure that inmates are treated fairly, that those sort of things are happening. And he talks about diversion and some of those things. So our law enforcement in this state is leading the way. The challenge that they have facing them now is they've got this nationwide public leftist agenda coming after them. And when you look at the amount of police contacts in the country as a whole, 40 million, John, over 40 million police contacts a year, yet all you hear about are these one-off cases. The majority of cops and sheriffs and deputies that serve day in and day out do their jobs, risk their lives every day, and now we're going to try to tear that apart. And it's just wrong.
I do, John. My wife and I live in Loudoun County.
Tim Phillips.
Tim Phillips, AFP. Action. My wife and I live in Loudoun County. Our 4 children, came up through high school, middle school there, and we have a safe county. And we have a safe county because we have law enforcement that does the right thing, that do it in the right way, and frankly, they have the support of the community across the board. And the thought, I watched that, some of the police chiefs around the country, like in Seattle, where they were clearly hamstrung by politicians. Mm-hmm. And it was heartbreaking. It really was. So I'm glad, Sheriff Chapman, you did what you did and stood up.
Well, it was easy to do when we have about a 90% citizen approval rating and we got the safest county in Northern Virginia, so they really didn't have anything to go after us on.
Yeah, but it was a blatant power grab.
Oh, absolutely.
It's incredible
and the
that they would
citizens
try
saw
to do
that.
this.
The citizens saw that, and I think that's why they came in about over 90% in our favor to not go for this, and I think it blew them away.
Yeah, and I like that having 90% is really important. But I think in the conversation, the bigger conversation, it's important to always talk about what's the best use of police officers' time. And we're advocates for some reform in some of these spaces, and it's important to think about that in the terms of look at Eric Garner. They were enforcing a cigarette tax when he was choked of his life on the street over a cigarette tax. When you look at, and if you ask an officer, like, when do you want to show up to the scene? Is it to be a hero or is it to be viewed as a villain because you've been represented in such a way? And I think if you ask any officer on the street, if you ask the average Virginian, the average American, you ask them a simple question is, what do you think is the best use of a police officer's time? 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be on some enforcing a regulation or some tax. It's going to be, or even a bounce check. It's going to be when someone is literally stealing from me or someone is violently attacking me. And I think that's a conversation that is appropriate, and I think a lot of police officers want to have that. When do they want to be called to the scene? And policy reform shouldn't be demonized that are talking about what is the best use of the police officer's time, and I think that's something that we should have conversations about.
Buddy, let's get to you a second. When you were talking about earlier when Andrew Naggs and Senator Reeves were talking about immunity and letting officers get sued, and Sheriff Chapman said, 70% of officers would just quit and go into some other field of work, right?
Well, it's a real problem. If you take away the qualified immunity and you allow anybody to sue somebody that's making $50,000, $60,000 a year and they can lose their entire livelihood, that's a real problem. Nobody's going to want to get into it. And then if you also, one of the moves that they're trying to make here in the Commonwealth is to make an assault on a law enforcement officer a misdemeanor. Mm-hmm. And that's only going to invite people to then challenge you and fight with you, and all they're going to get charged is a misdemeanor.
Why are they what is the purpose of this?
That's a good question. I think it's just as they're trying to overrun law enforcement. They're just trying to control what's going on in law enforcement.
I think part of that, Sheriff, is also this idea of this so-called criminal justice reform. But actually what they want to do, I think, would have an opposite effect because, again, you're going to end up with more police attacks, which will I think, lead to a more violent response by the police officer or the sheriff's deputy. So again, you'll have the opposite effect of things. another one thing is the reducing it from a felony. I have my constant contact a poll question I've been working for all my constituents, and right now it's running about 93% against reducing this thing from a felony to a misdemeanor. And so again, my son-in-law is a sergeant over in Chesterfield. I know what he goes through over there on a daily basis.
How do you make assaulting an officer a misdemeanor, Andrew? How do you do that?
Well, I think.
who in their right mind would sponsor that bill and be in favor of it?
Well, it's all connected. I think what Sheriff Chapman said previously is critical, and it bears repeating. If you don't feel safe, nothing else matters. Right. And that is really the core of the issue here. I've said it throughout my campaign, and I will continue saying, I've been saying this for many years, that what is being attacked is not necessarily the topic at hand. What is being assaulted is our American confidence. It is our feeling of security and our ability to lead our lives, because then what that enables is further centralization of power. So yes, making assaulting a police officer a misdemeanor, that seems absurd. Getting rid of police altogether, that seems absurd, but it all serves the purpose of making people feel vulnerable and then willing to give up more and more liberty to a centralized authority. And also, too, what Sheriff Chapman just had to deal with up in Loudoun County, that's an attempt to further separate people's ability to secure themselves and to put more government in between the people and law enforcement. That is what is so powerful about sheriffs here in the Commonwealth and elsewhere that has it's the same constitutional construct. It's that those law enforcement officers and ultimately the sheriff is accountable to the people. And without that, I think we lose something very special.
No question.
Yeah, John, can I chime in here real quick?
Yes. Yes, sir.
I just want to make sure everybody truly understands what qualified immunity is. And I want to break it down in layman's terms. And you got an attorney there through Andrew, and I know the sheriff will chime in. What you have to understand is officers are trained a little over 500 hours now. And now they're talking about even adding another 40 hours of critical incident training, of which I don't know how we're supposed to pay for all this training when they defund us. But I regress. Qualified immunity is basically this. I'm an officer. I go through the academy. I get trained by a field training officer. I have an adherence to what they call general orders of a department, which is kind of standing orders. This is what you can and can't do within the confinements of the law into which your training is. And so as long as I perform those duties to the best of my ability, in accordance with my training, in accordance with my general orders and the law or the Code of Virginia, then if I get sued, which I'm sure Sheriff has been sued, I've been sued, right? Then the county is the one who takes up for you. So you're not sued individually, but you have representation. It doesn't prevent you from getting sued. If you go out and you do your job recklessly or you perform a civil rights violation, you're not only probably going to get sued, you're probably going to get locked up as well. And I think the qualified immunity there is there for a purpose to allow officers the peace of mind, just like the Good Samaritan law, that I'm trying to do the job to the best of my ability in accordance with what I've been trained and what the law is. And somebody's got to have my back, and that's where qualified immunity is. You get rid of that, you get rid of law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very good points, Senator Reeves. One of the things you actually brought up before, I think you were talking about the parole board and them letting this Vincent Martin go, and I know I did an op-ed on that back in June because I find that so offensive. This divide that they're trying to make with regards to law enforcement and and the citizens here and the politicians is just crazy to me. And so we did an op-ed on that, and then I saw that there's been some pressure now. We actually had notified. In the op-ed, called out the governor and called out the parole board for not allowing any victim witness statements in this thing, and then he went ahead and they released this guy anyway. By the way, that was right when I started my law enforcement career, and I could relate to this guy, 23 years old. I was 21, 1979, pulls over a car. he gets shot, and then he's down on the ground and he gets shot 4 times in the head. And I mean, just a brutal slaying. And you have the parole board letting this guy out, and he should have gotten a death penalty. And you probably know the history of that better than I do, but. It's just a shame the way that police have become the villains, law enforcement's become the villains. Bad guys are the good guys are the bad guys. I just don't understand what's going on out here, and it really does destroy public safety.
Final word to Sheriff, to Amanda Batten, and to Bryce Reeves. Are they going to try to take this up on the special session, Amanda, and Buddy Fowler on Tuesday, a week from Tuesday? Are they actually going to try to take this up in Virginia? Have you heard anything?
I absolutely think that we're going to be looking at some legislation. I'm not exactly sure what and to what scope. I think, again, there are a few things I believe that we can have some bipartisan agreement on, but some of these other things which we discussed today, I'm not going to support any way, shape, or form.
Amanda, are they going to try to push through qualified immunity on August 18th?
Yes, I think there's going to be an effort toward that end. Whether or not it'll be successful, I think, remains to be seen. But I do think, I'm not sure, maybe it was Andrew who mentioned this earlier, that's a way to say you've done something without saying that you've defunded the police. But it is effectively, gutting law enforcement.
All right, final word, Senator Reeves. Are they going to
Absolutely. I've got the bill. Scott Servo is carrying a 33-page omnibus bill that hadn't been put in. Yes, and I promised my House colleagues I will send you that. It's out there. I'll send it to you, Sheriff, as well. We have to defeat this. There might be a couple areas, if they break the bill down differently, do 8 separate bills because they're still trying to decide on the rules. But it's been filed. Servo's carrying it, and he's advocating for it, and they're going to try to push it through.
Unbelievable. All right, final word goes to Tim Phillips. Tim, thank you.
John, thanks for joining us today. I'll tell you, AFP Action, if folks want to join us from the greater Richmond area, we're knocking doors. It's only about 90 degrees today, basically a balmy, cool day. What a better day. John Fredericks maybe is going to put on an AFP Action T-shirt, do some door knocking. One of the best policy champions literally in the country is Nick Freitas. And I mean that. That's not just a rah-rah statement. When you look at his record and how he goes about this thing, this is a top 10 congressional race in the country. We're going to get this done for a good person.
All right, let's make predictions, and then we'll go, Kara. Who's going to win the 7th, Freitas or Spanberger? Tim Phillips.
Well, I'm going to go with Freitas. It's a shocker, I know, but I actually think that he's the right candidate for this one.
Amanda?
Freitas, obviously.
Sheriff?
Freitas, of course.
Nick
Buddy
Freitas.
Andrew?
Nick Freitas, no doubt.
John Fredericks, who just predicted that Justin Fairfax is going to be the Democratic nominee for governor, and my predictions are always accurate. Nick Freitas beats Spanberger November 3rd. Trump wins again. John Fredericks Radio Network. Thanks, AFP Action. Had a great time.